Are you ready, David?
I am.
Okay, we are rolling. Here we go.
Excellent. And for those who are watching this video, this is actually being recorded. I decided today to bring you into the actual voiceover practice. So let me just show you the fantastic coach I am working with, as Christina Smith, and this gentleman here, great sound engineer. This is Steve Moore, and we are at Clayton Studios in St. Louis. So with that, we are working right now on 3 pieces towards getting a demo ready for audiobooks. So Christina, which one do you think we want to do first, or do you want me to pick?
Let's go with Earth the Marauder.
Earth the Marauder. Earth the Marauder by Arthur J. Burks. What has gone before. The Earth was dying. Ever since Sarka I, king of scientists, had been given mankind. The Earth was dying. Ever since Sarka I, king of scientists, had given mankind the secret of life, which prolonged life indefinitely. The Earthlings had multiplied beyond all count, and been forced to burrow deep in the ground and high into the air, in the desperate search for the mere room in which to live. There was much civil war. The plight of the children of men was desperate. Something had to be done.
Now remember, we were going kind of a captain's log.
Oh yeah, a little more Dune too.
Picard, kind of Star Trek feeling here. And we have to feel the desperation in all this. Now your first line out of the gate, that was great. The Earth was dying. So that's obviously depressing.
Right.
But then you're taking the next line to explain what's going on. You don't want to rush through this thing. You want to be intentional. You want to have purpose behind your words. And take those moments, those little pauses that we talked about last time, and use those. Use those to your advantage.
Gotcha.
So let's try it again, and maybe give yourself that intro. Stardate, something, and then Earth was dying, and then go into your read.
Okay. Earth the Marauder by Arthur J. Burks. What has gone before. The Earth was dying. Ever since Sarka I, king of scientists, had given mankind the secret of life which prolonged life indefinitely, the Earthlings had multiplied beyond all count, and been forced to burrow deep into the ground and high into the air in the desperate search for the mere room in which to live. There was much civil war. The plight of the children of man was desperate. Something had to be done.
Thank you for remembering the whisper at the end. That was great. Thank you for that. Okay, so I feel like there are parts where you're like rushing through.
Yeah.
And the first section where you're doing that is where you're saying the secret of life, and you're rushing through there, and it's coming off as a question rather than a statement. So the Earth was dying. Ever since Sarka I, king of scientists, had given mankind the secret of life. Remember, we're using those words, intentional purpose. The secret of life, which prolonged life indefinitely. Remember, we're pointing back to that previous statement.
Right.
The Earthlings had multiplied beyond all count and had been forced to burrow deep into the ground. And don't rush from deep into the ground and high into the air. They had been forced to burrow deep into the ground and high into the air.
Okay.
So give yourself a little pause there. In the desperate search for the mere room in which to live, there was much civil war. The plight of the children of men was desperate. Something had to be done.
Okay, let's try and give this one. Earth the Marauder by Arthur J. Burks. what has gone before. The earth was dying. Ever since Sarka I, king of scientists, had given mankind the secret of life, which prolonged life indefinitely. The earthlings had multiplied beyond all count and been forced to burrow deep into the ground and high into the air in the desperate search for the mere room in which to live. There was much civil war. The plight of the children of men was desperate. Something had to be done.
So not too bad. Your inflections were much, much better there. Very good. I think we were a little high pitched in places.
Okay.
So if we can keep it on more of that serious tonality, and maybe in your lower register, with that same inflections that you just did.
Okay, let's see what we can do. Okay, let's see if I can Vader this.
I'm your father, Luke.
The earth was dying. No, sorry.
I like that. I don't know if we'll be able to do that through the whole book.
And I don't think so too. And I think Disney would probably sue me for attempting that.
There's that too.
Yeah. You know, good old Mickey looks really nice, kicks everybody down. Okay. All right. Earth, the Marauder by Arthur J. Burks. What has gone before? The earth was dying. Ever since Sarka I, king of scientists, had given mankind the secret of life, which prolonged life indefinitely, the earthlings had multiplied beyond all count and had been forced to burrow deep into the earth and high into the air in the desperate search for the mere room in which to live. There was much civil war. The plight of the children of man was desperate. Something had to be done.
You were so close to being there. Like, with just a little bit more fluidity and maybe moving the pace along a little bit, that was so much better.
Okay.
From your first run through. Well done.
Thank you. Okay, let's try this again. Earth, the Marauder by Arthur J. Burks. What has gone before? The earth was dying. Ever since Sarka I, king of scientists, had given mankind the secret of life, which prolonged life indefinitely, the earthlings had multiplied beyond all count and had been forced to burrow deep into the ground and high into the air in the desperate search for the mere room in which to live. There was much civil war. The plight of the children of men was desperate. Something had to be done.
Something had to be done.
Something had to be done.
Maybe not go up at the end. Maybe something had to be done.
Something had to be done.
There you go. We want it depressing.
Yeah. This is a depressing paragraph. I mean,
let's give everybody some Zoloft for this book. Very nice. All right, so let's switch it up then, and
Okay.
let's go.
Shall we
Do
do?
you want to be a vampire, or do you want to be Dr. Jekyll?
Oh, do we go with Jekyll and Hyde, or do we go with the vampire? Oh, you know what? Let's go with the vampire because that one is more tricky for me than Jekyll and Hyde.
All right, now remember, you are painting this picture for the
Right.
listener. So
Right.
you are in this location. You are describing this in detail for all of us to see in our mind's eye.
I feel like I should grow my teeth or something, you know. Time to be the vampire. Okay.
I could always bring you in some fake teeth from Halloween if you want.
Oh, yeah. Well, they don't do those permanent dentist teeth, you know. Okay. The Vampire, a Tale by John William Polidori. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. The ground upon which I tread had been subdued from the earliest ages. The principal objects which immediately strike my eye bring to my regular. That's all, folks. Let's try that again. Okay, take 2,844. The Vampire, a Tale by John William Polidori. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. The ground upon which I tread has been subdued from the earliest ages. The principal objects which immediately strike my eye bring to my recollection scenes in which man acted the hero and was the chief object of interest. Not to look back at earlier times of battles and sieges. Here is a bust of Rousseau. Here is a house with an inscription denoting that the Genevan. Here is a house with an inscription denoting that the Genevan philosopher first drew breath under its roof. A little out of town is Ferney, the residence of Voltaire, where that wonderful, though certainly in many respects contemptible character received, like the hermits of old, the visits of pilgrims, not only from his own nation, but from the farthest boundaries of Europe. Here, too, is Bonnet's abode, and, a few steps beyond, the house of that astonishing woman, Madame de Staël, perhaps the first of her sex, who has really proved his often claimed equality with the nobler man. Okay, outside of the stumbles.
Yeah,
I don't know why I was stumbling.
you know, I know we haven't done a lot with accents, and we've tried them here and there, but this one is just screaming something.
Yeah, it is.
The Vampire, a Tale by John William Polidori.
I wonder if I can do an Italian.
I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. I want you to feel that you're breathing. Like it says, I breathe freely. You're taking a deep breath. You're breathing it. If you could bring the register down and talk with more, I don't know, forcefulness is the right word. Confidence. Remember that confidence that we were talking about before the winter break. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. You know, wherever you can get some emphasis behind your words.
Okay. The Vampire, a Tale by John William Polidori. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. The ground upon which I tread has been subdued from the earliest ages. The principal objects which immediately strike my eye bring to my recollection scenes in which man acted the hero and was the chief object of interest. Not to look back. Ah, boy. Okay. I lost that one.
No, that's okay. Give yourself permission to stumble. Remember, we all make mistakes. It's
Yep.
all good.
That's where the editor comes in. So let's go take that from the top again. Okay, I just got an image of this guy. Let's see if I can pull this off. I'll explain this image after we're done, if I can pull it off. The Vampire, A tale by John William Palladore. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. The ground upon which I tread has been subdued from the earliest ages. The principal objects which immediately strike my eye bring to my recollection scenes in which man acted the hero and was a chief object of interest. Not to look back to earlier times of battles and sieges. Here is the bust of Rousseau. Here is a house with an inscription denoting that the Genevan philosopher first drew breath under its roof. A little out of town is Ferney, the residence of Voltaire, where that wonderful, though certainly in many respects contemptible character received, like the hermits of old, the visits of pilgrims, not only from his own nation, but from the furthest boundaries of Europe. Here, too, is Bonnet's abode, and a few steps beyond, the house of that astonishing woman, Madame de Staël, perhaps the first of her sex, who had really proved its often claimed equality with the nobler man.
What I liked about what you did,
Mhm.
I felt that there was more character there. We want to be sure that we keep the character consistent.
Yeah, like I felt him lost it.
Yeah, so there was a little bit of in and out there.
Mhm.
But the fact that you were trying and that you were really standing behind the words that you were speaking, that was great. Now, there were some odd moments, like in the previous one, where you ramped it up a little bit and then you pulled back and you were drawing out words in odd places. So that we need to work on a little bit.
Okay.
But the feeling behind it was getting there. You're really getting solid behind that. So let's try it bit by bit. So let's forget the intro part. Skip that for right now. Let's just do, I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. Milk that first sentence for all it's worth, because that is your intro sentence, and that's what's going to hook the person that's listening.
I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake.
Take a deep breath. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake.
I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake.
The ground upon which I tread has been subdued from the earliest ages.
The ground upon which I tread has been subdued from the earliest of ages.
Yeah, don't want to say subdued.
Yeah, don't emphasize that.
Subdued.
Yeah. Yo, dude. Yo, dude. Come on, dude. I told you what dude really means, didn't I?
No, you didn't.
If I tell you, I can guarantee that you probably will be unlikely to ever use that name again.
Okay, now you have me hooked.
Okay.
What?
Dude comes from basically the Old West. And this is where you get the idea of dude ranches and so forth. It's not a compliment. People, somewhere in the 60s became, hey, dude, what's going on? See, dudes were dressed up dandies who really didn't know how to ride or had been in the saddle for a long time. So they developed boils or dudes on their butts. So a dude is a pimple, is a butt pimple.
In other words, there was chafing on the saddle.
Uh-huh.
Pimples on your butt. Awesome.
Yeah. So now, next time somebody says dude, watch your mind go, oh God, no.
So if they call it dude ranch, they're calling it a
Butt pimple ranch.
yeah.
Because
I was going with the A word, but yeah.
Yeah. Because it's for amateurs who aren't used to it. Yeah.
Not a compliment.
Yeah, now a compliment. Which is why I cringe every time somebody calls me dude. I'm like, okay, I know you don't know the meaning.
Well, I know that kind of follows suit with like some of the Southern ladies where they go, darling, oh, it's so good to see you, when they really don't mean it's
Yeah.
good to see you.
Bless your heart. Yeah.
Bless your heart is like,
Yeah.
oh, you're such a wicked witch. I wish you weren't here.
Yes. Bless your heart, you damn bitch.
Like,
Okay, back to this.
all right, so back to the vampire. Okay.
Back to the vampire.
Big deep breath. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. The ground upon which I tread has been subdued from the earliest ages. The principal objects which immediately strike my eye bring to my recollection scenes in which man acted the hero and was the chief object of interest. Throw in some highs and lows and slow moments, fast moments, move it in different textures.
Yeah, we definitely don't want this to be an instructional video where I'm doing.
Yeah, you don't want every line to sound the same because you will lose your audience.
Yeah, just like you do in instructional videos. I'm sorry, did I say that loud?
Well, if you're getting paid for that, that's different.
Yeah, it's a totally different aspect. Yes. Okay. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. The ground upon which I tread has been subdued from the earliest ages. The principal objects which immediately strike my eye bring to my recollection scenes in which man acted the hero and was the chief object of interest.
So let's take that feeling, like we did with the previous one, and bring it down into our lower register.
Okay, Darth Vader.
More confidence and more purpose.
I breathe freely in the neighborhood. Nope.
That was just yelling. I want you to feel it.
Right. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. The ground upon which I tread has been subdued from the earliest ages. The principal objects which immediately strike my eye bring to my recollection scenes in which man acted the hero and was a chief object of interest. Not to look back at earlier times of battles and sieges. Here is a bust of Rousseau. Here is a house with an inscription denoting that the Genevan philosopher first drew breath under its roof. A little out of town is Ferney, the residence of Voltaire, where that wonderful, though certainly in many respects contemptible, character received, like the hermits of old, the visits of pilgrims not only from his own nation, but from the furthest boundaries of Europe. Here too is Bonnet's abode, and a few steps beyond, the house of that astonishing woman, Madame d'Astil, perhaps the first of her sex who has really proved its often claimed equality with the nobler man.
So the top, the part that we've been practicing, up into, where you start talking about the bust of Rousseau.
Okay.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That was exactly the feeling. Now, I think what we're doing with this next part is we're not quite sure yet where you want to pause and where you're not wanting to pause. And I think that's just because we haven't gone through this one in a while.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could be.
So it not to look back to earlier times of battles and sieges. Here is the bust of Rousseau, and here is the house with an inscription denoting that the Genevan philosopher first drew breath under its roof. A little out of town is Ferney, the residence of Voltaire, where that wonderful, though certainly in many respects contemptible character. You want to make sure that contemptible and character are together. And I know there is a slight pause, but that's only because it's an adjective descriptor for the noun that's proof that it's
right.
Okay. So in many respects, contemptible character is what you were doing, but in many respects, contemptible character. So you want to make sure that that's all one cohesive thought.
Okay.
received, then you can pause, like hermits of old, the visits of pilgrims, not only from his own nation, but from the farthest boundaries of Europe. So give yourself some pauses in there in more appropriate places.
Okay.
So to speak.
Let's see. Where do you want me to take it from? The top or?
No. So let's go to not to look back to earlier times of battles and sieges and start right there.
Okay. Not to look back at earlier. Take that over home.
Don't forget your confidence and with the purpose. Deeper register.
Not to look back at earlier times of battles and sieges. Here is the bust of Rousseau. Here is a house with an inscription denoting the Genevan philosopher first drew breath under its roof. A little out of town is Ferney, the residence of Voltaire, where that wonderful, though certainly in many respects contemptible character, received like the hermits of old the visits of pilgrims. Let me redo that one. I did not like that. Okay, backing up to not to look back. Not to look back. Not to look back to earlier times of battles and sieges. Here is a bust of Rousseau. Here is a house with an inscription denoting that the Genevan philosopher first drew breath under its roof. A little out of town is Ferney, the residence of Voltaire, where that wonderful, though certainly in many respects contemptible character, received, like the hermits of old, the visits of pilgrims not only from his own nation, but from the farthest boundaries of Europe.
The pauses were better,
Okay.
much better. So I like where the pauses are right now. What I'm not liking is it's so purposeful that everything's coming out
Boom,
at
boom,
the same
boom, boom.
boom, 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 boom. It's like you're punching
Yeah.
a punching bag over and over and over again. So maybe if we take that first line, not to look back to earlier times of battles and sieges, make that more reflective because you are reflecting back right there. Not to look back to earlier times of battles and sieges. More matter of fact, like you're saying that to yourself, like, not to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Here's the bust of Rousseau, and here's the house with an inscription denoting that the Genevan philosopher first drew breath under its roof.
Yeah,
so you're really thinking about what you're saying. You're walking along this street and you're pointing things out to us and you're reflecting on these things as you're describing them.
Okay, yeah, that's a little different different point of view than I was going with. So, yeah, okay, cool. Okay, let me see if I can do this. Not to look back at not to look back at earlier times of battles and sieges. Here is no, I don't like how I did that. Wait a minute.
Maybe not so forceful. Not to look back to earlier times of battles and sieges. Kind of more not mumbly because we obviously need to
Understand me, yeah.
Maybe just not as forceful because you're saying it to yourself, kind of.
Not to look back. Okay. Not to look back to earlier times of battles and sieges. Here is the bust of Rousseau. Here's a house with an inscription denoting the Genevan philosopher first drew breath under its roof. A little out of town is Ferney, the residence of Voltaire, where that wonderful, though certainly in many respects contemptible character, received, like the hermits of old, the visits of pilgrims not only from his own nation, but from the furthest boundaries of Europe.
Okay, so you lost air. A little out of town is Ferney, the residence of Voltaire. You were trying to run a relay race through that sentence, and so by the time you got to Voltaire, you completely lost your breath. And then we're that wonderful, though certainly in many respects contemptible character. With the last little bit of air that you had, we lost all intents and purposes. So mark this. A little out of town is Ferney. Little breath. The residence of Voltaire. Pause.
I like how you did that. Okay. Okay.
And that way, you're not going to run out of breath before you get to the other section.
Okay, so let me go back to the not to look back to earlier times and see if we can pull this off as one thing.
Yeah, and remember, reflective, not to look back to earlier times. Like, you know, like when someone's talking and they're going, not to do this. We're not doing this, but we are doing it.
We are doing this, but I'm going to claim my innocence of not doing it. Right.
Exactly.
Not to talk about that bad girlfriend you had who took all your money, but, you know, not to say I told you so, but, you know, yeah, gotcha.
Exactly.
Yeah. Not to look back to earlier times of battles and sieges. Here is the bust of Rousseau. Here is the house with an inscription denoting that the Genevan philosopher first drew breath under its roof. A little out of town is Ferney, the residence of Voltaire, where that wonderful, though certainly in many respects contemptible character, received like the hermits of old the visits of pilgrims, not only from his own nation, but from the furthest boundaries of Europe.
Yes, those pauses work much, much, much better.
Yay.
Keep those. Okay.
Okay.
Now, let's go back to the top. And I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. So we're going from that, and then we're getting more reflective again. Not to look back to earlier times with battles and sieges, but I'm going to tell you anyway, and then go into the rest of it. And let's see what it sounds like from the top down to Europe.
Okay. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. The ground upon which I tread has been subdued from the earliest ages. The principal objects which immediately strike my eye bring to my recollection scenes in which man acted the hero and was the chief object of interest. Not to look back to earlier times of battles and sieges, here is the bust of Rousseau. Here is a house with an inscription denoting that the Genevan philosopher first drew breath under its roof. A little out of town is Ferney, the residence of Voltaire, where that wonderful, though certainly in many respects contemptible character received, like the hermits of old, the visits of pilgrims, not only from his own nation, but from the furthest boundaries of Europe.
Not bad. I felt like you were going in and out of character again, but it's getting there. It's getting there. Okay. So, do we want to do a character? I really think we should.
I think so too. This is being told in first person. This guy, and you know, I still need to read this story fully through. I have not read it, but I think this is the vampire. And I keep on trying to picture. Okay, I told you I was trying to picture something earlier. Do you watch Gotham?
No, I don't.
Okay. I try to think of the guy's actor's name, and it's not doing any good. But anyway, Gotham, the character, the actor who plays Alfred Pennyworth, who is teaching Bruce Wayne, who's 10, 12, 16, however old he is now, to slowly become Batman. He's giving him instructions. That actor has played Julius Caesar. He has played, there's a great mystery series in which Derek Jacobi played Brother Cadfael, and this guy played the undersheriff of Shrewsbury. So he was the head of the police force, learning from this monk who had been a soldier and is basically a forensic detective. So if you play with the idea of he's gone through all these different roles and now he's teaching Batman, well, Alfred Pennyworth is immortal. and thus he's teaching Batman from all of his previous experiences. And that's kind of what I was picturing as I'm picturing here. Here's a vampire who might be from Roman Empire. Yeah, of course we conquered this area. We subdued this land. Something along those lines.
You know what I was picturing?
Hmm.
Well, I mean, because I don't know that reference, but
Yeah.
I know what you're trying to say. So, Interview with a Vampire
Mm-hmm.
with Tom Cruise and giving his little play-by-play.
Oh no, that was Brad Pitt's character was doing the play.
Yeah, Brad Pitt, but then Tom Cruise towards the end, I think he did something too. Like right at the end when he shows up and
goes, this is
what's
guy
his name?
bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah, in the car at the end
Yeah.
there or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I felt like that was kind of where we needed to go. You know what?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we see if we can pull that up on here?
Okay.
Just for
Reference. And I bet you people in the world thought that voice acting was easy. All we had to do was read a script. So this is what we're doing. YouTube. There we go. Another reference I'm thinking of is.
Can't get it to go.
There we go. Was Highlander, the old TV show.
Let's try search for let's search for Interview with the Vampire beginning or something like along those lines.
Character you're talking about is the stats. So let's see. Of course, we're going to get commercial first. That's how that works. Oh, we don't have sound going on.
Oh, that's not good.
No sound out here.
There's a Steve question.
Yeah. And he was having to play. Maybe this is it.
Drink.
Okay, let's go again. This is not the scene you were talking about.
No, but
I might be able to pull up. Okay, people, let me just do this. Lucky to have such a home. Let me give you this rat.
yes.
Yes. Let me give you this rat. See how I feel as I pour out the blood as wine.
Shrine crystal shouldn't go to waste.
Good to the last drop.
I was thinking that. See, I love you so much. My adopted son. That I will give you the best rat box wine there is.
I'm a vampire who prowls the night killing rats and poodles who could have finished us both. You condemn me to hell. I don't know any hell. That's why that's why I chose you. But you can't kill me.
So I like what you did with that. You kind of embodied Tom Cruise's character there a little bit.
Yeah.
Rats, chickens, poodles.
Pets, chickens, poodles.
poodles.
What's the difference? Battles and sieges. What's the
Battles and
difference?
sieges are nothing to me. I have fought in all of the great battles, as it were.
So
Okay.
sometimes watching a reference video,
Mhm.
which is great, YouTube being currently free, thanks
Yeah.
to change.
For now.
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
So let's try it again.
Sounds good. Here we go, people. Okay. And by the way, those who are watching this and stayed on with this long, I will warn you, you may not get the full through to Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, because battery is starting to run a little low. That's because idiot here forgot to plug it in. So, okay.
We don't use the I word.
Oh, I do. I call myself an idiot when I believe it. Believe it. I need to be taken down a peg or two ever so often. I breathe freely. No. See, here's what I want to do. I want to give you this rat blood like it's wine. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. The ground upon which I tread has been subdued from the earliest ages. The principal objects which immediately strike my eye bring to my recollection scenes in which man acted the hero and was the chief object of interest. Not to look back to earlier times of battles and sieges. Here is a bust of Rousseau. Here is an inscription denoting that the Genevan philosopher first drew breath under its roof. A little out of town is Verney, the residence of Voltaire, where that wonderful, though certainly in many respects contemptible character received, like the hermits of old, the visits of pilgrims not only from his own nation, but from the farthest boundaries of Europe. Here too is Bonnet's abode, and a few steps beyond, the house of that astonishing woman, Madame de Staël, perhaps the first of her sex, who had really proved its often claimed equality with this nobler man. I stumbled on that last
Yeah,
part.
remove the stumbling at the end. That was great. I was smiling. Okay,
Yes.
so you are so totally doing Tom Cruise. Mark it down.
Yeah. Okay. Tom Cruise, Vampire Lestat.
I shall now call you Lisette from now on.
Okay. You heard it here, folks. I now have a brand new nickname. Oh, here we go. Finally, it's writing.
Very good. Very good. You should be proud of yourself. You were so acting in that. That was great. Great.
Okay. Yay. Okay.
While we're on that high note,
Yes.
go ahead and try to do Dr.
All right. Let me get back on that seat properly. And here, I know Christina knows this because I described it. And by the way, I did not go get to see that movie.
Oh, the Christmas
Yeah,
Carol?
the man who invented Christmas. Yeah. So if you ever watched the trailer for that movie, Charles Dickens basically is picturing the character, and he creates Scrooge, and that's kind of what I'm doing here at the beginning of this one. And yeah, that movie, the closest place that was playing it was out in St. Peter's.
That's ridiculous.
I know.
How are they, they make a movie, they spend millions of dollars,
Yeah.
and they put it on one screen in the
There
greater metropolitan area. Yeah.
Thank God for Netflix. When it finally comes out, I will see it eventually.
Like Stranger Things.
Mm-hmm. Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Story of the Door. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of a rugged countenance that never was lighted by a smile. Let me restart that. I had it, but I was stumbling. Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Story of the Door. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of a rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile, cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse, backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. At friendly meetings, and when the wine was to his taste, something eminently human beckoned from his eye, something indeed which never found its way into his talk, but which spoke not only in the silent symbols of the after-dinner face, but more often and loudly in the acts of his life. He was austere with himself, drank gin when he was alone, to mortify a taste for vintages, and though he enjoyed the theatre, had not crossed the doors of one for 20 years. But he had an approved tolerance of others, sometimes wondering, almost with envy, at the high pressures of spirits involved in their misdeeds, and in any extremity inclined to help rather than to reprove. Boy, did I stumble.
Well, that's okay. That's the same thing with each one of these. It's just
Yeah.
when you haven't seen it in a while,
Yeah,
and that's why when you actually do these things, it's good to go through and read and mark your copy.
right.
Remember, I told you I have a friend, and his saying is, "Mark your copy, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it, mark it." All right. So sorry, Uncle Roy, I borrowed your line. Love
Sure.
you.
Don't worry,
Okay.
Uncle Roy, she just steals from the best.
I love you, Uncle Roy. Okay. So anyway, so that it's helpful to read through something before you actually start getting into it.
Yeah.
Going back to the top, remember we said that Mr. Utterson, it is all bold, right?
Right.
So we need to make sure that that takes center stage. Mr. Utterson is walking center stage.
Yeah.
Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of a rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile, cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse, backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, and dreary, and yet somehow lovable. So all of those things are pointing back to Mr. Utterson,
Right.
who is walking on that empty stage, standing center, and you are describing that person right then and there.
Okay. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile, cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse, backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. At friendly meetings, and when the wine was to his taste, something eminently human beckoned from his eye, something indeed which never found its way into his talk, but which spoke not only in the silent symbols of the after-dinner face, but more often and loudly in the acts of his life.
How would Lestat sound doing this?
Mm-hmm. Vampire meets Jekyll and Hyde. Okay. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile, cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse, backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable.
Okay, so I
No.
like the feeling,
Uh-huh.
but what you were doing that was never lighted by a smile, cold, scanty, embarrassed, and discourse. You were rushing through that. So remember, that was never lighted by a smile.
Okay.
Pause. Cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse. Pause. Backward in sentiment. Lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. So there's a lot of pauses happening there.
Gotcha. Okay. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of a rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile, cold and embarrassed in discourse, backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. At friendly meetings, and when the wine was to his taste, something eminently human beckoned from his eye. Something indeed which never found its way into his talk, but which spoke not only in these silent symbols of the after-dinner face, but more often and loudly in the acts of his life.
So I don't know why, but I've got this Igor thing going through my mind.
Yeah.
Mr. Addison, the lawyer was a man of a rugged countenance. That was never lighted by a smile. Cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse. Almost like an old man kind of a reference. I don't know. Like,
No,
play
not
around with it a
Igor.
little bit.
Not Igor.
Who am I thinking of?
No. Oh God, I am so kicking myself in the you-know-where on this one. Story of Dracula. The guy who is his little toady. Renfield.
Oh, Renfield.
Oh, okay. I don't know why.
Renfield?
Renfield, get in here with your books. Yes, my master. Can I have some more spider? Said Munchon. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of a rugged Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of a rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile. Cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse, backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. At friendly meetings, and when the wine was to his taste, something eminently human beckoned from his eye. Something indeed which never found its way into his talk, but which spoke not only in the silent symbols of the after-dinner phase, but more often and loudly in the acts of his life. He was astir with himself, drank gin when he was alone to mortify a taste for vintages, and though he enjoyed the theater, had not crossed the doors of one for 20 years. But he had an approved tolerance of others, sometimes wondering, almost with envy, at the high pressure of spirits involved in their misdeeds, and in an extremity inclined to help rather than to reprove.
Not bad. So that kind of works.
Yeah,
But
I had to
it
play
might
with
be
it.
kind of tiring doing that character throughout, but I don't know. There's something about it when you bring a character to something where the words are flowing better.
Yeah.
Mr. Utterson, the lawyer was a man of a rugged.
Okay. You want cocky.
Let's see what you got.
Oh, just something else came to my head. Let's see if I can pull it off. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of a rugged countenance. I'm just getting into character. I'm not going to keep this. Yes, Batman. So you think you can beat me again, do you? Oh, Batsy. Batsy, don't even go there. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of a rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile, cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse, backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. At friendly meetings, and when the wine was to his taste, something eminently human beckoned from his eye, something indeed which had never found its way into his talk, but which spoke not only in these silent symbols of the after-dinner face, but more often and loudly in the acts of his life. He was astir with himself, drank gin when he was alone to mortify a taste for vintages, and though he enjoyed the theater, had not crossed the doors of one for 20 years. But he had an approved tolerance of others, sometimes wondering almost with envy at the high pressure of spirits involved in their misdeeds, and in any extremity inclined to help rather than reprove.
So was that the penguin?
Kind of penguin Joker match, but
Okay, so without doing the penguin or the Joker voice,
mhm.
can you use your regular everyday voice with the cockiness of those two characters?
Oh, let's see. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of a rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile. Cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse, backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. At friendly meetings, and when the wine was to his taste, something eminently human beckoned from his eye. Something indeed which never found its way into his talk, but which spoke not only in these silent symbols of the after-dinner face, but more often and loudly from the acts of his life. He was astir with himself, drank gin when he was alone, to mortify the taste for vintages, and though he enjoyed the theater, had not crossed the doors of one for 20 years. But he had an approved tolerance for others, sometimes wondering almost with envy at the high pressure of spirits involved in their misdeeds, and in any extremity inclined to help rather than reprove.
I like that. With it needs some more work, but I like that.
Okay.
So the feeling of those, the cockinesses of those characters in describing this person, because I get the impression that this person, when they're describing them, isn't that enamored with this person.
Yeah.
You know, he's a lawyer, like, lawyer. Oh,
Yeah. He's living with his facade, but
Yeah.
really he's got this deep, darker part. And it only comes out when he's drunk with spirits or power.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, did that feel better?
Yeah, it did.
Cool. All right. So, do you want to run through these 1, 2, 3, and go back to Earth the Marauder, and then the Vampire, and then Jekyll and Hyde, and see if we can pull off the transitions from one to another?
Let's try it.
The trick for the brain.
Trick for brains. Here we go. Gravy for the brain. Earth the Marauder by Arthur J. Burks. What has gone before? The earth was dying. Ever since Sarka I, king of scientists, had given mankind the secret of life which prolonged life indefinitely, the earthlings had multiplied beyond all count and been forced to burrow deep into the ground and high into the air in the desperate search for the mere room in which to live. There was much civil war. The plight of children of men was desperate. Something had to be done.
Needed a little bit more depressing. The earth was dying.
Okay. Pretending I'm cutting my wrists here.
Don't do that.
Let's get super depressed here. Earth the Marauder by Arthur J. Burks. What has gone before? The earth was dying. Ever since Sarka I, king of scientists, had given mankind the secret of life which prolonged life indefinitely, the earthlings had multiplied beyond all count and had been forced to burrow deep into the ground and high into the air in the desperate search for the mere room in which to live. There was much civil war. The plight of the children of men was desperate. Something had to be done.
Not too bad. The only part I really didn't like was the
Mhm.
secret of life.
I still hate
Because
that
you
money.
keep saying it like a question. The Secret of Life,
Mm,
ever since they were given this book, what is the name of the book? Just tell me the name of the book.
Secret of Life.
The Secret of Life.
Gotcha.
Not the Secret of Life. You're not questioning it. It's a real thing. It's tangible. Ever since they gave them this book, The Secret of Life. 1, 2, 3. Let's
Okay.
just do that line.
Ever since Sarka the First, king of scientists, had given mankind the secret of life, which prolonged life indefinitely, the earthlings had multiplied beyond all count. I'll pause
So
there.
ever since Sarka the First, king of scientists, had given mankind the secret of life, which prolonged life indefinitely, the earthlings had multiplied beyond all count. So it's almost like, if you want to get kind of snarky with the king of scientists, yeah.
Yeah.
Sarka the First, yeah, he was the king of scientists. Uh-huh.
Yeah, he was a real
It's all
dork.
his fault.
Okay. Let me try from the top of it. The earth was dying. Ever since Sarka the First, king of scientists, had given mankind the secret of life, which prolonged life indefinitely, the earthlings had multiplied beyond all count and had been forced to burrow deep into the ground and high into the air in the desperate search for the mere room in which to live. There was much civil war. The plight of the children of men was desperate. Something had to be done.
Not too bad. I think we need more depressing, but let's move on to the next one.
Okay.
And remember, let's stop.
Uh-huh. I'm pretending I'm actually feeling fangs with my tongue, which I know I don't, but I breathe freely in the The Vampire, a tale by John William Palladore. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. No, I'm not there. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. The ground upon which I tread has been subdued from the earliest of ages. The principal objects which immediately strike my eye bring to my recollection scenes in which man acted the hero and was a chief object of interest. Not to look back to earlier times of battles and sieges, here is the bust of Rousseau. Here is a house with the inscription denoting that the Genevan philosopher first drew breath under its roof. A little out of town is Ferney, the residence of Voltaire, where that wonderful, though certainly in many respects contemptible character, received, like the hermits of old, the visits of pilgrims, not only from his own nation, but from the furthest boundaries of Europe. Here too is Bonnet's abode, and a few steps beyond, the house of that astonishing woman, Madame de Staël, perhaps the first of her sex who really proved, as often claimed, equality with the nobler man.
So when you did the Lestat character before, like
Yeah.
you were like pouring wine and you were wringing
Rats,
by
yeah.
the neck, and boy, like I was so totally like, whoa, okay, cool.
Yeah, that
Can you
it
get
was
back
missing.
into that zone?
Yeah, I need to, because I did not like how I did that. The Vampire, a tale by John William Palladore. I breathe freely in the neighborhood of this lake. The ground upon which I tread has been subdued from the earliest ages. The principal objects which immediately strike my eye bring to my recollection scenes in which man acted the hero and was a chief object of interest. Not to look back to earlier times of battles and sieges, here is the bust of Rousseau. Here's a house with an inscription denoting that the Genevan philosopher first drew breath under its roof. A little out of town is Ferney, the residence of Voltaire, where that wonderful, though certainly in many respects contemptible character, received, like the hermits of old, the visits of pilgrims, not only from his own nation, but from the furthest boundaries of Europe. Here too is Bonnet's abode, and a few steps beyond, the house of that astonishing woman, Madame de Stael, perhaps the first of her sex, who has really proved its often claimed equality with the nobler man.
So not too bad, but it wasn't consistent throughout.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to get you a stuffed rat, and then you can just squeeze the life out of it while you're reading. Die, Mickey Mouse!
Oh, there you go. That'd be perfect. Die, Mickey. When you saw I tossed the rat over my shoulder, so.
I did.
Okay, yeah, we need more work on this one. I need to practice this more. Oh.
All right, let's do one quick run through of Jekyll and Hyde.
Okay. Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Story of a Door. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of a rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile. Cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse. Backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. At friendly meetings, and when the wine was to his taste, something eminently human beckoned from his eye. Something indeed which never found its way into his talk, but which spoke not only in these silent symbols of the after-dinner face, but more often and loudly in the acts of his life. He was astir with himself, drank gin when he was alone, to mortify a taste for vintages, and though he enjoyed the theater, he had not crossed the doors of one for 20 years. But he had an approved tolerance for others, sometimes wondering, almost with envy, at the high pressure of spirits involved in their misdeeds, and in any extremity inclined to help rather than reprove.
Not too bad. Not too bad. Of the
And-
three of them, that one, I think,
That one's still the strongest, but
yeah, I think so right now. And that was the one that was that the one you were worried about?
no. No, Vampire and Earth the Marauder are my two. That's what we did those first.
Go back and listen to yourself doing that first run through after we watched the Lestat character.
Uh-huh.
You scared me in a good way.
How it made Steve run again?
He wasn't here for that.
Yeah, I wasn't here for that, but, and I don't know if Christine said this in the last hour or so,
Mm-hmm.
but David, sometimes I feel like you're overthinking things.
You know, I would not be surprised if I was, to be honest.
And instead of overthinking, you need to almost overfeel things.
Yeah.
You know, it's feelings that you want to project. And so you just don't think about it, feel it. And that takes practice. And it's gonna, I'll be honest, take practice every day. Not all of these at once, but like take a script a day. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But that's my word of advice after not being in here for the last hour. But
And with that, I'm going to end this recording here and say to those out there, Steve has the best advice, and that's probably one of the big things that's been tripping me up. So with that, thank you for attending, and I promise the future ones outside of the studio will be shorter. Take care.